Father in heaven, we're opening your word, and we want to hear from the one who has invited us here. This wasn't our idea. It was your idea to meet with us, a holy space, holy time. And may your holy voice be heard in us, through us. Amen. The Bible begins Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. In the beginning, God. That's it. That's how it begins. And so this fall, we are jumping into a series with those words as our vision. This is God. That will be our sermon series. This is God. Barna Research kind of steps up to the plate. Did some research and says, hey guys, we got something going on here. There's something going on because Gen Z, Generation Z, I call it Gen Z. It's our latest generation. We've got a whole campus full of Gen Zers. They're born 1999 to 2015. That's the spread there. All right. Before that were the millennials. Before that were the Gen Xers. Before that were the boomers and the elders. And some history books we can read about them. But we got the Gen Z here. Barna Research is saying Gen Z is twice as likely to claim to be an atheist as any other generation prior to them. They don't see atheist as a dirty word anymore. They're 13%. 13% of the 2 billion, that's how many Gen Zers there are around the world. 13% of those 2 billion admit they are atheists. That's up from the previous generations of 5, 6, and 7%, depending on which generation you examine. But double, Gen Z is just out there saying we are atheists, and we are going, all right, so how do we reach them? Now, I believe there are rational, that is intellectual, cerebral reasons to know that you can know there's a God. I believe. You can argue from reason, from the point of reason, you can argue the existence of God. Exhibit A, you got the historical Jesus. He's a fact, recorded in history. We're not talking about the Bible, we're talking extra biblical sources that say there was a Jesus of Nazareth, who preached, did miracles, and died. Number 2, exhibit 2. We've got the fulfilled prophecies. Just incredible. You line these prophecies up, it's an incredible argument of reason for the existence of God. Transformed lives. You say, that's not so much. No, when you see cause and effect, there's got to be a cause to the effect of somebody who is hell-bent changing their ways. I believe it's reasonable. I'm not the only one that argues for intelligent reasons to know that there's a God. Anselm, his ontological arguments, says there's a God. Aquinas, his famous now 5 ways. There's a God. He believes you can prove there's a God. Descartes, his ontological and cosmological arguments that there's a God, he believes you can establish with reason that there's a God. You can prove it. Prove it. It's what these bright philosophical minds argue. But really, can you prove it? Can you prove it is or it isn't? Someone who's convinced in their ways, can you really change their mind? Ravi Zacharias says, not so much. And then he tells the story from the late Ravi Zacharias. A man woke up one morning, turned to his wife, and said, sweetie, I'm dead. She thought, well, come on, just take an Advil, shake it off. No, he said, I'm dead. I am really dead. I'm speaking to you from death. Okay. He'll get over it. She shrugged. He'll get over it, like most wives think of their husbands, whatever they're on that day. He'll get over it. Give him a day or two. He'll move on. A day or two later, he is still telling her, I am dead. I'm not even alive anymore. She sent him to some psychiatrists. He came back with the same conclusion. I am dead. I'm not alive. Day after day and week after week, she couldn't take it anymore. Finally, she convinced him to sit down with a team of medical doctors. And that team of medical doctors, just a circle of white coats, were there to prove one thing, to convince him of one thing, that only living people bleed. An hour and a half of charts, of data, slides, demonstrations. He finally admitted. He finally surrendered. He said, I guess I will have to grant you. Only living people bleed. Taking their cue, a doctor grabbed a pin from his coat he'd been waiting for and plunged it into the vein of the man where blood began to spurt out. The man, wide-eyed, responded, Great Scott! I guess dead people bleed too. That is, no amount of evidence will convince him to the contrary. Could it be that we could exhaust ourselves with Aquinas' 5 ways and my own arguments for reasonable proof that there is a God, but in the end, would we have missed it all? Would we have missed it all? My summer reading, I quite literally tripped. I'm reading this and I physically pause when I read this. For I've read this dozens of times, as have you. John 17 and verse 3. John 17 verse 3 is no new verse to us, but somehow, some way, this verse jumped and grabbed me. Galvanized my thinking. John 17 and verse 3. Now this is eternal life. Jesus. If you've got a red letter edition Bible, it's red. This is eternal life, that they know you. He's praying to his Father, that they know you, the only true God. And he finishes it off, and Jesus Christ whom you've sent. I've always moved past that. This is eternal life, that they would know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ. We must know Jesus Christ. But it stalled me in realizing that there was an and Jesus Christ, and that the first was mentioned as the only true God. Let me put it in the Goetz revised edition version, Goetz revised version. This is what is eternal, and this is what is life. Colon. You know what a colon means? It means one of two things. Either there's a list coming, or the second part of the sentence is going to qualify or explain the first. To know God. To know God, Jesus is saying, is eternal. And it is life. And that's what he's communicating. It is more than just a lesson learned. It is more than just a fact. It is eternal. It is absolute. It is ultimate reality in philosophical terms. And it is life itself. We kind of shove it away to say, it's kind of eternal life as it's a birthday party. You can take it or miss it. You've missed other ones. God, sorry I couldn't make your birthday party. I wasn't able to be there. That's not what Jesus is saying. This is not an event that if you know about, you can be there for. He's saying to know God is life itself, and it is eternal. It is absolute, unchanging, unbending. What Jesus said was a aggressive invitation. Not to know that there is a God. That's not his prayer. Not, oh Father, would it be that they know that you exist? but that they would know you. And in knowing you, you can read it in the reverse. To know God is life. To know God is eternal. It is the absolute, the rock that we're looking for, the truth, the unchanging, unbending truth that we want in life. Beloved, you have to be like I am. I am absolutely confused and confounded at what facts are facts. Oh, I've talked to, and I've read the information. I listened to the updates. Whew, you can't make heads or tails of what's going on. Jesus says, Father, I want them to know you because that's life. It's satisfying, it's meaningful, it's beautiful. Well, the quandary then presents itself. My favorite chapter in the Bible, Isaiah chapter 40, just packed full of promises, and it's just rich and deep, and I can read it over and over. It's just beautiful. Well, let me read from you just excerpts from Isaiah chapter 40. Let me read for you some of these lines. We're going to start in verse 9. So if you want to go to Isaiah 40, we're going to start in verse 9. We're going to end in verse 18, but we're going to jump quickly. We'll put it on the screen for you. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 9. Here is your God. Oh, what a presentation. Yes, finally, we're going to meet God. Here is God. Dun, ta-da! See the sovereign Lord comes? Yes. But now the descriptions. Now the painting is colored in. He who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand. The Pacific Ocean? Done. Atlantic Ocean? Done. Or with the breadth of his hand, that's the pinky to the thumb, marked off the heavens. Measures the distance in light years between his pinky and his thumb. Who has held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountains on the scales and the hills in a balance. Surely the nations are like a drop in a bucket. They are regarded as dust on the scales. He weighs the islands as though they were fine dust. Before him all nations are nothing. They are regarded with him as worthless and less than nothing. So with whom are you going to compare your God? The whole point is that he is in a category of his own. And as we try to measure and acquaint ourselves and understand the parameters of God, I have a Bible study I do every Friday with a young fourth grader via Zoom. She says to me, we're studying this yesterday, and she says to me, how am I supposed to understand a God that was never born like I was? I said, fourth grade has done you well. That's the exact question we're all at. What are we supposed to do? To whom will you compare this God? He's in a category all by himself. And so could it be because of that, because he is not comparable to anything like we can compare him to, we have just distanced ourselves from him. We've just placed him as a being that exists, but what are we supposed to do with him? If we need something, we'll be there. Well, of course, on Sabbath, let's go back to that Barna research. Oh, it's tragic. It's tragic that 13% of Generation Z, the generation we have on this campus, 13%, double what every other generation has ever done, says we are atheists. Tragic. I did something. We consider this Sabbath the first Sabbath back from the summers. I know some people are saying our summer's not done yet, but summer's done. Just count it over. So I hope you had a good summer. Hope you did some things you could enjoy. There were blessings to you. My family, we did. Got some reading in, some studying, did a little travel. One of our travels landed us in Michigan. All right, visit my in-laws, my wife's favorite parents. So we're there. And the idea comes, why don't we float the river? There's a river out here. We'll float it. We'll park the car there, We'll float it, have a picnic when we're done, a couple of hours on the river, delightful afternoon. We'll just take the afternoon off. All agreed? Done. Put away the books, the computer. While working remotely, I said, I'm in. We go to the river, park the car. Now we get in these tubes. Now that's not the new part. I've done that before. But I did something I have never done before in my life. We're floating down the river. 2-hour trip, right? 3 hours in, we're pulling the only cell phone out of a plastic that we have, out of the plastic Ziploc bag to check maps. Where are we? Woo! We aren't even halfway. We're 3 hours into a 2-hour trip, and we're not even halfway through that 2-hour trip. We got a car 3 hours that way and a car that 4 hours that way. Take your pick. Well, we were out of the river, now on the side going, who's going to hitchhike back to one of those cars, come pick up the rest of us? I'm in my Bermuda shorts and my towel, and now I'm along the side of the road doing something I have never done before. I have never sat on the side of the road with my thumb out. I'm walking back because I want to actually gain a little ground while I wait for this nice family that's going to pick me up, no doubt. And I experienced something I've never experienced on a highway. I run on highways occasionally or in our neighborhood, but when I'm on a highway and I'm out there running, cars sometimes barely acknowledge that you're there. They may hit the middle line, just kind of move over, kind of a little gracious nod to you. But I'm sitting there on the side of the road, or walking there on the side of the road with my thumb out, and cars are driving in the opposite ditch to get around me. Something about your thumb out makes these people drive on different roads. These people turning around, doing U-turns and driving around the block, trying to get around me. Eventually, a state trooper passed, turned around and came back, wanted to know what I was up to with my shorts on. And he took me back to the car. But there's not another soul in Michigan that picks up. You're out of luck if you're hitchhiking in Michigan. Here's the point. Could it be that we have a whole number, a whole segment that know that God is there and are driving their wide circles around him? They know he's there, but they're doing everything they can to go around him. Here's my argument. You remember that 13% of the Gen Zers that are atheists? That's a terrible number. And as one who lives or works on this campus to share Jesus, it's concerning. But there is another number that concerns me. What do I mean? Let me put up the numbers. Gen Z, 13%. It's 2 billion. 2 billion Gen Zers around the globe. If 13% of 2 billion is 260 million. So there are 260 million teenagers who are saying we are atheists. That number's disappointing. But let me put up another number. There are 2.4 billion Christians on this planet. According to researchers and missionaries Patrick Johnstone and Jason Mandrick, in their work, Operation World 21st Century Edition, they have concluded that it is right at about 50% of those who claim to be Christians are actual Christians. That is, they are participating Christians. Their life is reflecting God in some way. Right at about 50%, give or take a couple of percent. That means if we were just to take the 50%, 14% of Christians around this world know that God is there. They believe in a God. They believe that God exists. But they are taking wide swaths around him. 1.2 billion Christians. Half of us in this church are living our lives wide swaths around the God that we believe exists, but we don't know him. I'm concerned about the 13%, the 260 million teenagers that are atheists. What about the 1.2 billion, the 50% of us that are sitting in our churches and sitting in our schools, that are taking wide swaths around God? Yes, We believe he exists. I don't know him, not like that. Does he really want to be known like that? Yes. That's the declaration, that's the aggressive declaration of Jesus. He must be known like that. It is life and it is eternal. God must be known, not that he exists, he must be known. So you have Aquinas and all the rest of those bright minds. But then arises a French thinker, Blaise Pascal. He's a thinker, he's a philosopher, a theologian, a mathematician, a physicist. You know, I would like the talent and abilities of the world to be dispersed a little bit more. I would like one of those. Blaise Pascal got all four of them. He's a physicist, a mathematician, a theologian, and a philosopher. And after his death was published his work, Thoughts, right? Of course in French, but Thoughts. Pascal differs with those who argue that there is absolute, reasonable evidence that there is a God. He argues against it. He says, you cannot be sure that he is or that he is not. You cannot prove it either way. But then he poses a wager, and we only know 1/3 of the wager. There's actually 3 parts to this wager in his work, Thoughts. But we know of it as one part, and that's the wager that God exists. It goes something like this. God is or is not. Reason cannot decide between the two, and that's his argument. Blaise Pascal says reason cannot figure out if there's a God or not. But either there is a God or there's not. We know at least that much. Then he says a game is being played, heads or tails will turn up. It's going to be one or the other. You must wager. It is not optional. And then he argues that the results, if there's a God and you don't believe in him, you lose everything. If there's a God and you believe in him, you gain everything. If there's not a God and you don't believe there's a God, you lose nothing. If there's not a God and you believe there's a God, you still lose nothing. You don't lose anything by believing there is a God. That was his argument. Not that there is a God, but that if there is a God, you lose nothing by believing in him. His 2 fundamental premises was that there is either a God or not. There's only 2 options in the universe. And number 2, you and I must participate in choosing one of those 2 options. He says your life will determine, even if you have not thought it through, your life will determine if you side on one or the other. You cannot live in no man's land. It's impossible. That was Blaise Pascal's argument. And Laurent Thurim, French thinker and author, professor there, in reflecting on Blaise Pascal's, I'll put his words on the screen, in reflecting on Pascal's work and his wager, he says, belief in God doesn't depend upon rational evidence, no matter which position. You cannot prove, he agrees with Pascal, you cannot prove that there is a God, and you cannot prove that there isn't a God. And good news, that's not what we're going to try to do. But beloved, Pascal's second line, his second premise for his wager is this: you cannot live without making a choice. You have to choose. There is a God and I am all in, or there isn't a God and I'm all in. You will have to choose one or the other, and if you don't choose, if you don't have a cerebral moment, an intellectual decision in your life, you, through your actions, through the flow of your life, will choose one of those. What I'm afraid of is that we have convinced 1.2 billion people that there is a God, but we have never introduced him. There are 1.2 billion Christians, half of the Christian population around the world, and we would argue it's even here. Half who know that there's a God, know that there's a hitchhiker, but take wide swaths to know him. We can't know him. He's too big and Jesus says, no, he's beyond anything you can compare him to. But that's the dichotomy. He's beyond knowing, and he is knowable. Our problem is not intellectual, beloved. We could go over the prophecies that prove that there was a Jesus, that there is God. We can go over the historical Jesus or the ontological or cosmological arguments from Aquinas, Descartes, and others. But our problem, the 1.2 billion Christians who are taking that wide swath, avoiding the God, it's not that they don't believe he exists, they just don't know him. The problem is not intellectual, it's not in our minds, it's in our hearts. Now, some of you will remember December of 1965 when the Beatles released their album Rubber Soul. I listened to it for the first time this week. Glad you guys found some sort of enjoyment in that. But John Lennon, right, the founder of the Beatles, he was shot, assassinated, or murdered when I was 7 months old, so I don't remember it. But John Lennon wrote one of the songs on that album entitled Nowhere Man. I'll put the lyrics there on the screen for you. The Nowhere Man. He's a real nowhere man, sitting in his nowhere land, making all his nowhere plans for nobody. Doesn't have a point of view, knows not where he's going. And there's 1.2 billion Christians who live in that reality. That wasn't just a 1965 problem, that's a 2020 problem. And John Lennon knew what he was talking about, even if he was crazy in every other respect. There's a lot of people that are sitting in their nowhere with their nowhere plans. Oh, you say, no. I have plans. I have professional plans and romantic plans, and I have financial plans. What do you think John Lennon was talking about? He's talking about that, where you sit with just superficial, nearsighted. We're sitting in a nowhere man, sitting as nowhere men, sitting in a nowhere land, making all our nowhere plans. We don't have real points of view, and we don't know where we're going. 1.2 billion of us, Christians. We're not even touching the 13% of the Gen Zers that are atheists, or the rest of the 5 and 6 and 7% of the world that are atheists or Hindus or Buddhists. We're just talking about Christians here, 1.2 who know there's a God and are taking wide swaths around him with their nowhere plans in their nowhere land. That's what Jesus was talking about when he was praying, Father, this is eternal, and this is life. This will give them meaning. This will give them direction. This will be satisfying, fulfilling, and it will last forever if they know you. That's as clear of an invitation as we could ever imagine. You are invited to know the Father. Oh, sure, Jesus, we'll know Jesus, but what do you think he came for? To introduce us to the Father. American preacher and author John Piper tells of his conversion. His dad was a fiery evangelist. That's how he described him, fiery evangelist. He would make appeals until someone responded, and he would bring as much hellfire and brimstone and heat and suffering as he needed to get you to respond. Fiery preacher. One night, John says his dad was preaching in a church, and unbeknownst to him, a man had slipped in, an old man. Doesn't give the age. But for decades, the church had been praying for that man. Praying. He was hardened. He was cold. He was antagonistic against the idea of God. especially in his life. But that night he was sitting there as John Piper's father's preaching his heart out. And in the appeal, that man, that elderly gentleman, stood and walked to the front and took John Piper's father's hands. Together they sat on the front pew, and the man, as the congregation emptied out, could be heard sobbing and crying out, "I've wasted it. I've wasted it." John Piper said that was the moment, that was the story, he says, that gripped him above all the other stories of teenagers in car wrecks before they were converted or any other story he's ever heard. It was this story that gripped him and brought him to the point of conversion. He decided he didn't want to waste a minute, much less a year or a decade or his life. And there's 1.2 billion Christians who know that there is a God, but are wasting their life in no man's land, going nowhere. What about you? You know there's a God. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. You know there's a God. But do you know him? Do you know him? That's the invitation this fall as a campus. I know we're in 2 worship services, but as a campus, the invitation is this. Would you be willing to meet him again for the first time? Would you be willing to be introduced to him? I'm not going to, you may be having doubts if that there's a God that actually exists, and I don't know that you're convincible, and I don't know that I'll try. But what about the 1.2 billion of us, the half of us, who know there's a God, but have been taking our wide swath, staying a distant from him, not allowing him to affect our lives, our decisions, our loves? What if we were to dedicate this year to spending it meeting God, the omniscient, omnipresent, omniexistent, omnibenevolent, omni-authoritative God? What if we were to take up Jesus on his invitation? This is life and this is eternal. Know God. You just must know God. There's a passage from Psalm 34. We're going to be singing scripture songs through this fall. We want to learn. Pastor Nestor and the worship leaders are going to lead us in some songs that are straight from Scripture. It'll help us memorize it. One of those is our theme song. It's written right out of Psalm 34. It's not just an allusion. It is takes it, copy and paste it. Psalm 34. Psalm 34 verse 8. The song will close with these lines. Psalm 34 and verse 8. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, blessed is he who hides in him. We could say, or knows him, or gets intimate with him, gets close to him. That's going to be our theme. Blessed is the man. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, blessed is the man who is willing to do that. Beloved, here's the question. It's the appeal I made to every Gen Zer that sat here in first service. Would you be willing this fall, with whatever doubts or struggles or journey that you're on, would you be willing, be open to meeting God again for the first time? If you're willing to join me in that, I'll take that step with you. Would you join me by standing? God, I've had a few doubts. I don't even know about this loving thing. How about the pain and suffering? I don't know. I just don't know. Some days I don't even know if you exist. But I'm willing, God. I am willing to meet you again for the first time. And maybe I have been taking those wide swaths around you. You've been on the road all along, and I know you're there. I can see you're there, but I don't really know you. Would you be willing to join me this fall in meeting God, getting close to him again for the first time? Let's sing Psalm 34.
I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from every fear. Those who look on him are radiant. They'll never be ashamed. They'll never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard me and saved me from my enemies. The Son of God surrounds his saints. He will deliver them. He will deliver them. Magnify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name together. Glorify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name forever. Magnify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name together. Glorify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name forever. Let us bless the Lord every day and night. Never-ending praise. May our incense rise. Let us bless the Lord every day and night. Never-ending praise. May our incense rise. Let us bless the Lord every day and night. Never-ending praise. May our incense rise. Let us bless the Lord every day and night. Never-ending praise. May our incense rise. Magnify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name together. Glorify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name forever. Magnify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name together. Glorify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name forever. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Give you everything. He'll give you everything.
Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace until again we meet in worship. Amen.